My name is Jimmy Storrie. I'm a professional counselor and I lead the ministry Life Recovered. We provide counseling and mentoring retreats and resources for ministry leaders and their families. That name, Life Recovered, came from a contemporary version of Scripture, Matthew 11:28, where it says, "Come to me, get away with me, and recover your life." God had placed that vision for this ministry in my life during some very challenging days. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in a Christian home, recognized early on that God was calling me to vocational ministry, graduated high school, went to college, and earned a degree in Bible, and then on to seminary. I went on to serve several churches in ministry and also spent some years in denominational service. I was very successful on the outside, serving first in small churches and then the last 10 years in some very large churches. Sought after speaker and conference leader, wonderful wife and kids, I seemingly had it all together. Unfortunately, some sexual integrity issues that had started when I was a teenager had continued and escalated over the years. I made some very unproductive choices, and my actions hurt a lot of people. I ended up being released from my church staff role and really thought that God was through with me. However, that was the beginning of a journey of healing that has brought me to this point today. I shared the story of being on a retreat with my wife about 2 years after I was released from my job. The retreat leaders had asked us for us to go and spend the day with God and let Him talk to us. My wife and I went to a beautiful place near a mountain and stream, and we sat there all day reading our Bibles and singing and praying. At some point, I noticed a tree where some of the branches were covered in webbing. The leaves were brown and there was no growth. It was as if God was saying to me, "This tree represents you. You have been encumbered with debris and not functioning as I intended." Then I noticed a tree just on the other side of that tree, the one that was covered by webs, and its branches were not covered in debris or had any webs on it. There was new growth. And again, I heard God saying to me, "This is who I created you to be, and you will find freedom in me to grow again." I left that day with a new sense of who God is and how He was going to use me to help others. I came home, began to seek what God's next steps for me, and ministry friends began to reach out and seek counsel and direction for their own life issues. God was realigning my call to use my story to help other ministry leaders. I eventually went back to graduate school and earned a master's degree in professional counseling and launched Life Recovered in 2009. I'm grateful for the opportunities and people that God has placed in my path over these last 12 years. The book Leading on Empty by Wayne Cordero is the story of his journey, and as he states, will hopefully help you see further ahead and be aware of the potholes. In chapter 1, when the needle points to empty, he chronicles his journey with phrases that I understand and you probably do too. A collision with burnout, an emotional hemorrhage, a silent predator, and a slow motion implosion. Those are pretty descriptive. He shares a story that I often share as well, the story of Elijah in 1 Kings. I have a message that I preach, share sometimes, called "We All Need Recovery" on these same chapters. In chapter 18, Elijah confronts, defeats, and destroys hundreds of priests of Baal, his greatest ministry victory. I'm sure he was feeling pretty good about himself. But then in the next chapter, he is confronted by Jezebel's rage, and she proclaims that she is coming after him to kill him. Now, does Elijah remember what God had just done through him and not worry? No. He panics and runs to the wilderness to hide, and then decides that perhaps it would just be better if God killed him. Moses is another biblical example of someone who dealt with stress unproductively. In Numbers 11, he cries out to God to kill him because his task is too great. Death would have been preferred to the dire circumstances he was facing, definitely feeling depressed. And you know, the Bible is full of life stories of those who were challenged spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. These two, along with others, will be the guide in the coming chapters of this book. Cordero goes on to tell some more of his story that I'm sure will resonate with you. Many responsibilities, striving for excellence, managing too much, and becoming overwhelmed. Does that sound familiar? He expresses that it was like an inside erosion and quotes Psalm 69, 1 and 2. "Save me, O God, the floodwaters are up to my neck. Deeper and deeper, I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am in deep water and the floods overwhelm me." Does that sound familiar? It sure does to me. Cordero goes on to share about his breakdown, coming to grips with the reality of his situation and then recognizing the problem. He never doubted his calling and gifting, but shares that what began as a joy had become a load that now drained him. I would characterize him, and really myself, as in a deficit and depleted, in need of recovery and replenishment of soul. The focus of his next 3 years was to recharge, reflect, and restructure. So the journey begins. So let's talk about some resources to help you. First, I would encourage you to seek professional help. You know, it is not a weakness to ask for help, but a strength. Staying in a mess, isolated and unproductive, is a weakness, while reaching out for help is a sign of strength. Pastors and ministry leaders are human and deal with the same emotional and mental issues as other humans. It is absolutely acceptable for you to seek help. And a great place to start is by connecting with the Texas Baptist Counseling Center. Dr. Katie Swafford can help you to find a confidential professional in your area in which to meet. You'll find more information about connecting with Katie and her office at the end of this video. Second, give yourself permission to take care of yourself. If you are not caring for yourself in what I would call the 5 pillars, spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological, and relational, then you are not going to be able to serve well in any role. Pastor, ministry leader, husband, wife, parent, friend, you're going to be depleted and in a deficit there. And if you're not sure where to begin, here's a suggestion. On my website, liferecovered.com, on the right side of the homepage, you will find some resources. One of those resources is the Ministry Leader's Self-Care Assessment. This is just a 2-page good place to start for assessing how well you're taking care of yourself in those 5 pillars. The instructions are listed on the assessment, along with some steps to take to begin to focus on self-care. You'll also find information on Life Recovered and this resource at the end of this video. Cordero shares this quote in the last few pages of chapter 1. The only way to finish strong will be to first replenish your system. If you don't, prepare for a crash. The purpose of this video series and of this book is to help you recognize those potholes and to navigate through them productively. Hoping that you will be intentional as you continue to journey through life and ministry today. I have a lot of people ask me what I do to recharge myself, because I do pour into a lot of people who need to be replenished. They're reaching out to me because they're struggling. And so I have got to be careful, very cautious and very intentional. And you'll see on my self-care assessment, I make sure that I do this from time to time just to check in and make sure that I am following some parameters there and some boundaries. But one of the things that I do is I take a recovery day. I take one a week that is not really my day off, but is a day to recover. It is a day for me to rest, to spend some time with my wife. I dig in a little bit spiritually, a little deeper spiritually on that day. I may take a nap in the afternoon. And you know what? If that refreshes you, then do it. You know, some people will say, oh, well, that's wasting time. Well, if it refreshes you to take a nap or to sit back in your chair, I've got a great article that's called The Importance of Wasting Time. And it talks about these things that we can do that may seemingly be wasting time, but it allows our mind to focus other places and to rest some in that. So it's okay to have those moments. So that's some of what I do. On my recovery day, I make sure that I enjoy that day. I'm resting some, digging in some places. I don't meet with clients on that day. I don't answer emails. I don't answer phone calls or so forth. I also love yard work. That's my favorite kind of release. And we have a beautiful old house and yard, and I spend a lot of time outdoors in the flower beds and working in the yard, because that does refresh me and kind of takes me out of my routine. And that's a big part of learning how to refresh, is stepping out of your normal routine, getting to an intentional spot where you go, okay, I need to take a break, and then being intentional and purposeful in that.